So I'm not. I love the idea of sharing wisdom. So I think it's a very relevant topic, particularly today with the what's the word I'm looking for, with the fast-paced change that AI is bringing, and I think it's actually something that we need to be very mindful of. That not losing wisdom and kindness and thoughtfulness, when machines are making decisions for us and making suggestions, that we also remember the human side of things. So I think getting the balance right is important.
Beautiful. And since you already started like that, let's continue the conversation this way also, okay? Yeah,
Yeah,
so
no
Sharon,
problem.
it is an honor for our audience to have an idea of who you are and the work you are doing. So please introduce yourself first, would you?
Yeah, so my name is Sharon Dehmel, and I work with scaling companies or small to medium-sized businesses who are looking to empower their leaders. Very often, the sort of companies I work with don't have the resources of big companies where they have full-time HR and coaches and a lot of training budgets and things like that. So a lot of the learning is by doing. And I'm a big believer in empowering people. I think that people, a little bit of what you're talking about today, people actually know more than they realize. We spend so much of our time focusing on what we don't know instead of tapping into what we actually do know. And I think that's very powerful, particularly when you're working with younger leaders where they realize they actually do know a lot. They've had experiences, both positive and negative, and tapping into that. So I help them to scale fast. I'm a big believer in perspective taking. I think it's one of the things we forget. It's what it's like for the person on the other side of the Zoom screen or the table or even our clients or our colleagues. And I think that that can bring very powerful decision making when we tap into that. So I, I provide a blend of actual leadership development and also bringing in the business side of things, particularly when you have subject matter experts, let's say their background is engineering or IT, and they won't necessarily have had much interaction with business models and strategic thinking. So I like to bring all of those elements together, but at their pace and in a very empowering way that they feel I can do this.
Wow. Wow. And that I'm sure our audience will be benefiting from your wisdom over the years of working, helping people to grow. Before we get there, okay, I want to ask you, what have you done recently that you look totally different, totally, like amazing,
Oh,
fabulous?
you know what I've done recently is I've decided I'm going to age disgracefully. And part of that is I did my first 10K actually in September, and I'm doing my next one now in December. So I guess it's me, because I think I also believe that we are so much better as leaders, as coaches, as people, when we're actually pushing ourselves to do something that is not easy, that really stretchable. I think it allows you to show up with humility with others when you're doing something that isn't in your comfort zone. So for this year, that was my goal, was to get fitter, um, and all of the benefits that come with that, both in terms of just feeling better, having more energy, but also doing things. A lot of people in my age would say, "Oh, you're too old to be doing things like that," and I'm going, "No, I'm not." You're never too old. You're never too old to take responsibility for your own fitness. So I think probably that's what you're seeing as the result of that. And enjoying it. I've never seen, I think it's one of the things I do a lot of with my leaders is our identity and how we see ourselves. So I've never seen myself as a sporty person.
Mm.
But I do see myself as somebody who's responsible for their health going forward, particularly in this day and age. We spend so much of our time in front of a screen, even you and I today. It would be so much nicer to be walking along side by side, but we're doing it here. Um, So I think for me, it's that shift in mindset about how I see myself. Up to now, I would never have said see myself as a runner, but I'm doing it now, so I am, and it doesn't matter what that it looks like. It doesn't matter that it takes me longer for than somebody else to complete the run, but I'm doing it, and that's what matters to me. So that's, I guess, the change you're seeing at the moment.
Do it more, do it often, and then spread it to other people so that they can have that change that you've been having,
Yeah,
man. I love it. Okay, Sharon.
yeah.
Alrighty. This topic, as you mentioned earlier, is we talk about wisdom. So let's start small. Okay, let's start with the fundamental. So each of us will have a definition of wisdom differently, and I and the audience would love to hear from Sharon her own definition of wisdom. What is it to you?
It's a very good question, and my answer would be experience plus reflection.
Experience plus reflection. Okay, can you
Exactly.
explain more?
Yeah. I think, we all, from the day we're born, we're having, or even before, we're having experiences, um, in our lives. And we very often go from one experience to the next without actually stopping and thinking about, well, what has this given me? What's it taken away from me? How has it challenged me? How has it helped me grow? How has it helped me learn? And it's that reflection piece for me is where wisdom comes from. Because it's only when we look back and reflect on what we've just been through that we gain wisdom and insight. So, you gave a wonderful example of your grandfather. Um, I think older people, we see, or we tend to see older people and we recognize they have a lot of wisdom. Because unlike your grandfather, a lot of older people slow down, as they get older. Um, but part of that process is reflecting on what went well and what didn't go well in your life, what you're proud of, what you're not proud of. And I think that that's where, and regardless of age, I think it's one of the things that I love when I'm working with people, particularly younger people, is actually getting them to think about the wisdom they've already started to accumulate on their journey.
Hmm.
Um, because sometimes I see that they think, oh, I haven't done this and I haven't done that. And I know they haven't. But in order to get where they are today, they have had a lot of experiences, both good and bad. But it's only tapping into those that
Hmm.
they actually get wisdom, their own wisdom, because it's a lot more powerful when you
Hmm.
talk about your own experiences. Like I know we can read all these amazing stories of people who have overcome incredible challenges, and they can be incredibly inspiring. But there's nothing like the experience you have, the holes in your own shoes. They're the ones that really have a big impact on us, and also for me. And I think it's that's what inspires me, and for me, that's where wisdom comes. Wisdom only happens when we actually stop and look back. And I'm not a believer in spending our life looking, in the past, and because that can bring a lot of people. They say people can be, if you're living in the past, you can be quite depressed. But it's looking back to learn forward. So looking back to see, okay, what went well, what didn't, what can I learn from this? Not to think, oh, I did this bad. And yeah, you did. We all make mistakes. So you're not going to get it right. That's what life is about. It's all of these learning moments that we have. So for me, that's what sums it up is the actual experience plus reflection.
Okay. So that two puzzle we're gonna unveil today, unveil that secret today. Okay. So experience, then reflection. So let's
Yeah.
start with experience. What is it, and how can we define it? In our life. How can we know it in our life?
I think, there's a lot of discussion around mindfulness and being in the present moment. And I was actually at the Web Summit recently, and it was mind blowing how incredibly fast things are changing and things will change. Um, and a lot of this change is happening without reflection, without actually thinking about, well, what has it brought us so far, and what's it going to bring us in the future. And I think that our experiences, both that we have as children, as young adults, as mature adults, they're all very different. And sometimes we get to a certain stage where we stop to think, we forget to think about what we've learned. My daughter, she's going to a wonderful school here in Portugal, and a lot of what they do is they actually get the children to reflect on things. And it's a great practice. So if you ask her about something, she'll automatically have already, because it's become a habit that she has learned through the school teaching her, when you do an exam or do a test or do something and you get feedback and what did you learn from it and what you're happy with. So they even ask them to give their reflection before the teacher ever gives them their grade. So that they're actually making the decision themselves, but they also give them a framework. And that framework is, this is not about, it's easy to criticize. It's easy to say, oh, this was wrong and that you didn't do well here. But it's much harder to say, well, actually, no, this was wrong, but I know why it wasn't. Maybe the part that I had in that experience, which maybe I didn't study enough, or maybe I didn't pay attention, maybe I was distracted in that moment. But the most important part is what are you going to do with that information? Because we're all going to have those moments. And I think when you start, I see so often people are so quick to criticize themselves. Like I work with a lot of different leaders, and the first thing, the list is so long. One of the questions I ask people is, what are your bottom strengths? What are the things that you're not good at doing? And they are so good at listing off all of those things. There's people, we're so quick to criticize ourselves. We're very hard on ourselves. And we don't actually look on what we are good at and what we have, how we've improved and what we've done well so far. And I think when we keep ourselves in that constant state of not good enough, not good enough, we're not actually learning. We're just constantly moving forward without bringing the insight and the knowledge with us so that we can build on that going forward. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if I'm going off topic.
That really, really deep thinking right there, insights for us to think. So what could we do to stop being so criticizing ourselves, to help us to be, like as ease and open to the learning experience, so that we can, like get the best of it and then move forward with the lesson that
Yeah.
we can learn from it.
It's interesting because, criticism is something that's hugely impacted by our culture. So, depending what culture you're from,
Mm.
we all have experienced, parents or teachers, and their idea of what good criticism or reflection looks like. And very often our children, we take on that mantle. So it's almost like we're handed this mantle of what it's like to, because it's easy, you didn't listen, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. And I do understand that culturally it can very much differ. I'm from Ireland. Um, in your country, how feedback is given through teachers' education in the home is very different. So I'm not a believer in one size fits all. I think you have to be mindful of where people are coming from.
Mm.
And some cultures are a lot more direct than others. So in some cultures it's perfectly acceptable to be very, strong and critical. And if I'm from a culture where I'm not used to that, where we tend to be a little bit more indirect, then I can become very offended. So I think you have to think about how you see it in your own space. I don't believe in imposing, what good looks like in my world into your world. I think that you have to decide that. But I guess what's the outcome that you want?
Mm.
How do you want to feel? So if you are, I very often, one of the things that I think is hugely important, in order to have wisdom, you have to have resilience.
Oh, okay. And
Because
why?
it's hard to keep going. And particularly when we do get criticism, and sometimes that criticism can cut us to the core. And other times we just feel like we're so busy looking at what we haven't achieved, we don't realize how far we've actually come already. And at that very moment, I think sometimes, because you see people who overcome incredible challenges, either health challenges or, from rags to riches, incredible stories. But there's one thing that a lot of those people have, and that is incredible resilience. It's not that they don't hit ground zero. It's how they get back up. And for me, that is so important, is helping us as individuals, doesn't matter what age you're at, helping our children, helping our young leaders, our more mature leaders, is to understand what resilience is. Because people talk about this, because I think if you imagine an elastic band, if you keep stretching an elastic band, it'll eventually snap.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that wide stretch that allows you to reach, its potential without actually breaking it. And resilience is so important. It's almost that capability to be able to say, okay, that didn't go well. I really made a mess of that, or I didn't get that job, or I didn't pass that exam, or whatever. It's so many people, you see, they just give up at that moment. They say, well, I'm not good enough, or I can't do it. And if you have the resilience to keep going, and it's that moment where you really truly experience wisdom, I believe, because you're really tapping into that experience. And it's okay to feel, to have that moment, because emotions tell us things.
Mm.
Like if I'm feeling frustrated or angry, it means something needs to change.
Mm.
And sometimes people just stay in that anger and they don't change anything. There's a lot in this world that we cannot change, particularly nowadays. But what we can change is ourselves and how we react to these things. Um, so I think that's really an important piece. And if we feel sadness, we need to let things go. So what in your life, maybe I think a great example, you see it so often with, you see these amazing athletes, like famous footballers, who are at the peak in their game, and then they come to a certain age and they have to retire. And very often they struggle. That's part of our identity. They struggle to reinvent themselves. They struggle to find a new place, in the world, a new purpose. Because it's, they're holding on to the past, and they don't let it go and look at, well, what is those experiences given me that I can now use for something else, and
Mm.
tapping into that piece. But the resilience to go through that change, that um what is it, like when the butterflies change, when they go through the I can't think of the word right now. We go from the little caterpillar into a butterfly. That process is very challenging for us all. So I think sometimes, we're under so much pressure to have all the answers, to know what to do. Um, and resilience is part of it, is knowing it's okay to know I don't know what to do right now. I don't
Yes.
have all the answers, but this is what I do know. This is what I've learned so far. This is what I know about myself. This is what I understand that I can take from that old identity into my new identity, and how can I find new purpose. And so that's a mixture of resilience, because it's hard. It's hard to stay in that space, and we give up. Um, and it's that, going through that, and then comes the wisdom, because you realize, oh, do you know what that was? And you see, so many people have written books about this. These aha experiences that they have,
Mm.
um, and they're incredibly inspiring. But unfortunately, generally, it involves some kind of pain.
Mm. Wow.
Yes, generally the rebirth is not easy, so to
Mm.
speak. Um,
You were saying something else. Can you continue?
yeah, so Now I've forgotten what I was talking about. um, yeah, so resilience, I think, is incredibly important. And without that, you can't tap into your wisdom, because otherwise you stay, when we go down, we stay down.
Mm.
And sometimes in those moments, it's so important to people around us to help us. But the most important person is you.
Yeah. Wow.
You're the only one who can pick yourself up and stay up.
Yep. Sharon, earlier in this conversation, so we're gonna go into the resilience topic later in this conversation. But before that, you mentioned about the word mindful. If we're mindful about our differences, what we know versus what we don't know, because I always imagine the word if we can be a little bit slow in our judgment, a little bit slow on our, like decisions, and then just to try to think a little bit more so that the thing that we're about to say, the thing that we're about to do, think about it a lot more so that it's gonna, when we say things and when we do things, it's not gonna create something impactful in the different in the negative way for other people, right? And if everybody can do that, imagine how beautiful the world is. So that mindfulness, that space of being mindful about the pressure, the perspective of other people's lives is very important. And you mentioned that in the world that we are running today, we have to quickly come to conclusion, quickly come to decision, quickly come to the results. So those two words will collapse. Yeah, and it makes us really hard to be mindful about what Sharon wants, what Sharon thinks, what Sharon knows and stuff, and quickly, implement our thinking into that process so quick. So what can I do to really slow myself down, to put ourselves into your shoes and your head to think?
Yeah, I recently had a conversation with a young leader. I've read this somewhere. It's not my idea, but I can't think who wrote it. And it was around, they were struggling with decision making. And decision making is one of the things that also is affected by culture. So
Mm,
if you think about, in certain cultures, being decisive, make a decision fast is what's required. In other cultures that are a lot more consensus based, you have to actually, um, talk literally from the shop floor up, engage with people, get their feedback, because they see decision making as very important, and it's important that before the people at the top of that pyramid make the decision, that they actually gathered and collated carefully the input from everybody. But again, that's a cultural thing, and I'm a big believer in looking up and out into other cultures and what can we learn from each other. But also decision making, it's so there's three types of decisions. There's hats, there's haircuts, and there's tattoos. The hats, if you make a wrong decision, you just change your hat. You just, either take it off or you get a different kind of hat. So the long term impact is not um, going to be
mm,
um, very good or bad. The second one is a haircut. So if you think about it, when you get, I don't know if you ever, my mother used to cut our hair when we were young in Ireland. Oh, we didn't have the best haircut, shall we say, we were young kids. It was pretty basic. And we all had the same haircut. Um, but eventually it'll grow out after a couple of months, So if that decision was not the right decision, then after a couple of months, we can revert back or make another one. And then there's the tattoo decision, which is a lot more permanent. Now, obviously, with
mm,
today's technology, you can remove one. But if it's a decision that is actually going to effectively be there for a very long time or forever, then we do need to slow down and we do need to get other people's perspective. So I always say to people, because sometimes what happens, what I see particularly in a world where we are automatically under a lot of pressure to get it right all the time. So it's almost like we have these two ambidextrous worlds we live in. We have the world of innovation, creativity, and what's the latest and greatest and whatever. And then you have this world of stability, which is, building on optimizing what is already there. So the room for error on that part of the equation is very little. And when you, in particularly in the world I work in business and also in life, when you try to merge those two together, it's almost like two very different mindsets.
Mm.
And people struggle. And it's this idea that decisions are either right or wrong. And I don't believe that they are. I think decisions, depending on what kind of a decision it is it a half a haircut or a tattoo? You know, is it something we can correct very quickly? You decide to go to this restaurant, you didn't like it, you just don't go there ever, you know, the next night or whatever. But the other side of that is the decision process that we need to be creative and innovative. You're not going to get it right because that's part of the process is failing, failing, failing till until and learning as you move forward and getting and tapping into the wisdom of that whole experience. Whereas
Ah.
things that are more established, you know, we know we have the data, we have the information, you know, it's very easy to figure out and very quickly if this is a right or wrong decision and self correct or whatever. But it's so I think it's like a lot of things, you know, even when it comes to things like decision making, you think, oh, you have to make a decision and it has to be fast.
Mm.
The skill is understanding, the wisdom is understanding which type of decision it is.
That is very important right there, Sharon, because something that you think is a hat decision could be a haircut decision for me, and then something you think is a tattoo decision, it could be just a haircut decision for me, because we have a different. I saw my colleagues fighting over, you know, the argument over where to eat and what kind of food is more important. So how can we, and that's part of wisdom right there, to help people to realize what kind of, you know, decision is important, impactful, a tattoo decision, and what kind you can make it quick and let it go, or it's like hair that if it's wrong then it grows again, right? So how can you yourself think that, you know, to categorize the decisions, you know, and then in your own work?
I know you speak about, you know, deciding. I was out recently at a food festival here with a friend, and it was very slow, the service, but it was very the food was really good. But the other person spent their whole time thinking, I could have done it better myself. You know, I could have done it faster myself. Why am I waiting here? Why are we wasting time? My attitude, my mindset was, well, you know, we were having a glass of wine together. So, well, actually, this is really nice wine. I'm actually, I haven't seen you for a while. Let's just chat while we're waiting. You know, I'm just want to be here in the moment with you and enjoy it. And again, it's that, you know, you gave the example as well of the restaurant moment. Like so many different things going on. For some people, food is a pleasure, and other people, it's just, you know, it's something I have to do in order to keep going. And you can have two very different approaches. You know, to somebody else, it might be, I want to show you my culture, and it's important that it's the right restaurant. Whereas, you know, you're like, I don't mind. You know, I haven't eaten all day. I'm starving. I don't care. Just give me something to eat. I think, you know, we have all of these different things going on. You know, it's about food. You know, we think we're having this shared understanding of what's happening, but actually, there's a lot of other things going on. So, this person I was with, like, it was a moment where they didn't have to care for the person that they have to care for at home. They didn't have to cook, but they had so many expectations about how it should be
Mm.
that they didn't actually see. Actually, this is a really nice moment just for us to be here together and talk and, you know, enjoy it. And it doesn't matter if it's slow. We're not really in a rush anywhere. And so often, you know, we're coming at these things from so many different perspectives that we just like, you know, that mindfulness. You know, we just see, you know what, I don't care. You know, whereas before, maybe years ago, I would have been, oh, it's terrible, it's bad service, blah blah blah. I'm like, I really don't care. I'm actually here with you. I haven't seen you. I really want to talk to you. I really care about what's going on with you. So much nicer to talk to you than on the phone. Um,
Mm.
and eventually I said, you know, just tell me what's going on with you. So eventually my friend, she calmed down and she, you know, and eventually got the food. It still wasn't up to her standard because she is a perfectionist. She, you know, food is her passion.
Mm.
Um, but, you know, I think sometimes we look at situations and context through only one lens. And
Ah,
we, like there's different things going on, different needs, different perspectives, different agendas. So, I don't know what, if you think about your moments with your colleagues, what were the different perspectives? Who was hungry? Who was wanted to go to a nice place? Who was the foodie in the group? Who had very little time? Who wanted to go someplace quieter so you could talk? Who wanted something where there was more energy and and get a vibe and experience the culture? All of these different perspectives coming together.
wow.
So, what's a good decision and what's a bad decision really does depend on where you're coming from.
Mm. And that will build resilience right there also, Sharon, because a long time ago, one of my mentor, so she was my boss, and she said that because you care so much for people, you put so much energy and resource to understand what people want, and then it seems like people are pretty practical for a lot of things. You get quick, 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 right? So you didn't get things in return for what is that for you, and you becoming like feeling painful through that process because it's only you thinking about what is that eating for that person, how where are we gonna go, what the budget is fit for everybody, but less not a lot of people will think of what is that for you, Sharon, right? So you mentioned about create a space for the other person to open and speak up, right? So what can we do to do that so that the voice, the one that have less voice in the group, will be able to join and participate and share in the decision making process.
I think I'm a big fan of reframing things, but also people, a lot of time, when people are like agitated or frustrated, is that very often they feel like they're not being heard, they're not being listened to.
Mm,
And it's amazing when you say to people, tell me what's going on with you. I noticed, that um, is it, have I missed something? Or, if they want to share with you. And very often people, are taken aback that you've noticed because we're so busy doing and not being. And I often think sometimes, we wake up in the morning and we collect one weight and we put it on our shoulders, whatever that is, the things we have to do today. And as the day goes on, we collect all of these, you know, be it encounters with others that drain us or deplete us, maybe it was a positive or a negative experience, or be it those critical voices in our head that we know, oh, that didn't go well, I should have done better. I think should is the worst modal verb in the English language, It,
mm,
it, it, it would be good to ban it from a lot of conversation. And when we show up, at this dinner, the example that we're talking about, sometimes I often think, I'm a very visual thinker, and I can sometimes feel that people literally have all of these weights piled up on their shoulders
mm,
and they're carrying. So when they're in that moment, they haven't kind of decided, okay, taken a breath and said, is this useful for me right now? Is this going to help me, enjoy my food or enjoy the company I'm with? And I'm not saying that you know, let them go forever. I'm just saying that maybe it's time to put them down for a moment and just
mm,
enjoy. We're here together, whatever the food is. Hopefully, it's wonderful, and I'm with people who care or are interested in my perspective. And sometimes we kind of have to press pause and just say, okay, what is happening in this moment? How can I get the most out of it? How can I connect with the people I'm with? So it's pressing pause. So when I was with my friends, I realized that she needed help to come down, and she needed help to just kind of because she was had all of these things that she brought with her to
mm,
our meeting, our lunch, and she needed help just to put them down for a moment and let's talk about you. What's going on? What's really going on? It's not about the food or the slow service. They're just the symptoms. That's the things they frustrate you. what is it about that that's frustrating you? Um, and I think listening to that is very important with people.
Then how can we build up that antenna inside ourselves to really look into the situation and really
Yeah,
see the thing behind the thing that we don't see?
yeah. I think that's where your wisdom comes in, doesn't it?
Ah,
I think that's where where you see through the words, the gestures, and you see the person behind that, and you recognize they're in this very heightened state of stress or anxiety. They're choosing to vent it on something that seems insignificant, but it's looking beyond that and saying, what's really going on. We have it all the time. Your wife or your kids come home and they're behaving a certain way. You're like, forgot, whatever, and you react to it. But if you actually zoom out or step back and go, hold on a second, that's not their normal way. What's going on? Let's sit down for a moment. And I noticed that. Tell me more.
hmm.
It's getting good at asking those questions as leaders, as parents, as partners. And sometimes I don't always get it right. Recently, my daughter got up. We had friends over, and I said something to her about something, and she's such a diligent student. And we are blessed with two daughters who work so hard, and she just started to cry. And I didn't notice the signs. She was because she's so capable, and we all, this can happen to us all, particularly for people who are capable, who are very, studious, diligent, who work hard. We assume that they've got it all under control. And I think they're the ones who are most susceptible
Hmm.
to, you know, anxiety and stress, and also not having resilience because they have a very high expectation of themselves. And when they have a failure, it hurts harder because they're not used to it. They're not used to not doing well. They're not used to, get being top of the class. And that was the experience with my daughter. She's, the last 2 years of school, the pace has increased, the intensity of learning has been, the difficulty is all, challenging. So she's gone from being able to cruise at a certain, and do very well. And now she has to really put a lot more effort in, and that's hard.
Hmm.
And that's how she's not used to it. But I nearly missed that moment with her because I was distracted. I wasn't looking. So I guess for me, it's to remember, because I'm normally good at checking in on my daughters, but I missed that moment.
Hmm.
And even though we think we have a great relationship, we forget that people experience shame and embarrassment. And even though you have a great relationship, and now just go, why didn't you say? I don't know if you've ever experienced this with team members or even with your own family. Why didn't you say something at the time?
Hmm.
And it's because we struggle with that identity, going back to identity of who we are. If I'm a good student, if I'm a smart person, if I don't pass an exam, the impact of that on somebody like that high performer can be a lot more devastating than somebody who just is, chugging along that, passing exams and happy to pass. It can be a lot more impactful. And I think sometimes they're the people that we miss.
Yeah. So that is reflection right there, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And which lead us to the second piece of getting wiser, getting wisdom. What can I do to build that muscle of reflection? So I'm not gonna miss the important things in my life, in the life of the people around me, and not, and be able to add in more values to other
yeah.
people. So,
I don't know if you've come across Marshall Goldsmith. He talks a lot about leadership, but one of the things he has with questions, did you do your best
mm,
to, so did you do your best to whatever that was, connect, listen, observe, pay attention to, um, be kind, whatever it is. Because I think also that even that question, what can I do? The reality is that um, you can't do everything. You can't solve everybody's problem. You can't be there 100% of the time for our kids and our family. The question is, did you do your best too? So did you do your best to listen today, truly listen today? Did you do your best to check in on whoever, child, partner, team? Um, it's taking away that I must, I should, I have to mindset. It's saying and if you say yes or no, then you can decide. Okay, well, what got in? Then you have your reflection piece,
Wow.
and then you start the next day, and you look and did you do your best? And the reality is, you're going to have days you didn't. Like I made, my daughter, I missed that the other day. Now we've got back on track again. But if I hadn't, if I'd let it go, that can get serious for a high performing, very self motivated person. So again, it's about we have so many high expectations. We are human beings, not human doings. We're not going to get it right every day.
So what can we do to accept ourselves as a human beings and forget about our the human
That's
doings part?
that's the journey I'm on with you. I don't have literally, there's some days you go, that was a good day, other days you go, oh, that was okay, that wasn't great, you know, um, but it's doing your best the next day
Mm,
and saying, okay, I didn't, this is what went wrong, this is what went well, this is what I'm going to do differently. I think it's keep asking those questions. They're my three favorite questions. What went well, what didn't go well, what would you do differently? And I think it's the what would you do differently? That's the third question is the most important one. It's easy to say what went well. It's easier to say what didn't go well. We're all good at
mm,
that. Some cultures more than others. The third one is, well, what am I going? That's where the wisdom comes. That's where the reflection comes. What am I
mm,
going to do with that? How am I going to show up differently the next day? How am I going to listen better the next day?
mm.
Because there's no way we show up at our best every single day. But was it good enough? You did your best under the circumstance. That's a
Beautiful,
different mindset.
beautiful. It's interesting that you mentioned about Marshall Goldsmith. That make me feel how beautiful this planet is, the universe is. A few days back, so I started a Thanksgiving project, and so I invited a few friends that we have in common, who is friends of Marshall Goldsmith. So I say, okay, hey Dean, hey Todd, hey, people around, and say, okay, why don't we do a video together and tell the world, why we appreciate that gentleman. And then they start sending over emails, to me about it. And then in this conversation, you mentioned about that, in which about an hour ago, I post the teaser on LinkedIn, saying about,
I didn't
somebody that
see
you're
it.
gonna and see, Sharon. So, we never know what we do until, and then starting to see the thing, the connecting backward. It feels like so awesome to me, Sharon. And
That's interesting.
yeah, and it make me feel like I'm doing this project of wisdom. It will mean something in the future that I'm just seeing it now, but I would love to make sense of it. And that ability to reflect, to think, to understand is really diminishing for a lot of people also these days in our hamster wheel of running and running and running. So if if you have a words of advice for people how to put onto the practice of having reflection and best use of that superpower we are having, how what would be that advice, Sharon?
I think actually you said about the hamster wheel. That's literally running on the treadmill is where I have the amount of times I jump and the way when you're running on a treadmill and you plunk your 2 feet on either side so you don't because and then I get my phone and I go I have an idea. It doesn't matter if it's whatever that works for you, if it's walking, hill walking, yoga, meditation, swimming, wherever you find there is everybody's different. Some people struggle to meditate. Some people, whatever. It doesn't matter what, but it's actually just switching off and giving yourself that headspace to think,
Mm.
and whatever works for you. Because everybody tries, oh, do this, and I go, no. For example, meditation, I always fall asleep. So, and then I don't say, oh no, you're really bad at meditation. I go, I actually needed that. My body was saying I'm tired. I needed to switch off. I needed
Ah.
a 10-minute power snooze. Um, but the running for me is my thing. But find your thing. Like everybody is so different. So some people it could be going kayak. It doesn't matter what we do.
Mm.
Um, but it's switching off. It's disconnecting. In whatever space works is available to you, whatever works for you. But it is journaling. I think is really important.
Mm.
Writing things down. If I'm struggling, I write either on my phone or in my notebook. Journaling really helps me to get clarity. I'm a very visual writer. Like I would write a story with somebody like with wearing a cloak and how the weight of it is burdening them down. But this cloak was handed to them. It wasn't one they chose to take with them.
Mm.
Um, And it's very different when you take that cloak off, whatever that responsibility, whatever that thing that's wearing you, and you look at it and you say, okay, is this something I'm willing to take on? Am I happy to, move forward and take this cloak with me? And if you make that decision, then it's very different to things being imposed on you. We find that a lot with families. You have to do this, you have to behave, you have to whatever. It's very different when if your culture allows it, because again, it's not always something that we have. We don't always, but we don't always have a choice in what we have to take with us on our journeys, but it's how we choose to carry them.
Yeah. The last question for this beautiful conversation is if you have a words of wisdom you want to send to our global audience, and it's a message of wisdom from Sharon, what would you tell the people?
I think the biggest thing for me would be treat yourself the way you would a, a friend you really care for.
And because
Well, if a friend comes to you and says, I'm in trouble, I have a problem, what do you do?
take care, we listen, yes.
And you try and help, and you say, it's okay, we all make mistakes, it's okay, we can figure this out together. We don't do that to ourselves. I have a family member recently who's been going through a lot of problems with health, and because they're in the healthcare profession, their idea of being kind to themselves is nothing like how they show up for others. And I think when you learn compassion for yourself and you learn to be kind to yourself, it allows us to show up so much better for the people around us. I always say, when you think about with your children, you say to them, why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you share? Why didn't you say you were having a bad moment? Why didn't you? And I would ask you, well, how do you handle those bad moments, those stressful times, those worrying thoughts? Because we are role models to our children, and how we show up for them and how we handle the challenges we face is their example. So very often we have a disconnect between what we say and what we do.
Mm.
And I think also for your team in a leadership role, if you're saying to people, go home, don't be working crazy hours, and you're still in the office doing crazy hours, and then you
Nice.
burn out or you get depleted and you make bad decisions because you're running on empty. It's and it's harder to follow your own advice.
Beautiful. It's the first time I heard it. So, in terms of the treat yourself like you want to be treated, your friend to be treated, right? So it's beautiful.
Yeah,
Sharon, it's always a pleasure
my
to see
pleasure.
you, to talk to you, and I always learn a lot from every time we're talking to you and reading your post. So keep doing that. Keep sharing the beautiful things you're doing to lighten the world, to help people to get better like this, and having many more of you in this world. It will make the world a better place for everybody. So
Oh, thank
thank you for
you.
doing that. Okay. All right, friend. If I travel to Lisbon, I will definitely let
You
you know.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's been
Yeah.
an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Tell your family, tell your daughters, and we say hello, okay?
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you. Have a wonderful rest of the day or night.